A 20-year-old Ukrainian model vanished for 10 days in Dubai after attending what she thought was a harmless party, leaving her mother desperate for answers. But when she was finally found on the side of a busy road with broken bones and a shattered spine, the horrifying truth about what really happened to her would shock the world. Dubai, March 9th, 2025. The glittering metropolis that never sleeps was buzzing with its usual energy as tourists and influencers flocked to capture the perfect shot against its towering skyline. Among them was Maria Kovalchuk, a 20-year-old Ukrainian model from Lviv, whose bright smile and ambitious dreams had brought her thousands of miles from home. Maria was not just another tourist seeking Instagram-worthy moments. She had built a substantial following as an OnlyFans content creator, using her platform to support herself while pursuing modeling opportunities across Europe and the Middle East. With her striking blonde hair and determined spirit, she had carved out a space for herself in the competitive world of digital influence. The trip to Dubai was supposed to be straightforward. Maria had flown in for a photo shoot and to celebrate a close friend's birthday. The city offered the perfect backdrop for the kind of luxury lifestyle content that her audience craved, and she had been excited about the professional opportunities that might arise. Her mother, Anna Kovalchuk, back home in Norway where the family had relocated, had been supportive of her daughter's career choices. Despite the unconventional nature of Maria's work, Anna understood that her daughter was building something meaningful and financially independent. They spoke regularly, and Maria always kept her mother informed about her travels and whereabouts. On that fateful March evening, Maria found herself at a karaoke club in one of Dubai's upscale districts. The atmosphere was electric, filled with young professionals, wealthy locals, and international visitors, all enjoying the vibrant nightlife that the city was famous for. It was here that she would meet someone who would change her life forever. His name was Artem Papazov, a 28-year-old Russian man who introduced himself with the kind of confidence that comes from privilege and wealth. He was the son of Oleg Papazov, a successful businessman who owned the Cinnabon franchise throughout the Russian Federation. Artem had the easy charm of someone who had never known financial struggle, and he moved through the club with an air of authority that attracted attention. During their brief interaction that night, Artem seemed pleasant enough. He was well-dressed, spoke multiple languages, and appeared to be part of Dubai's international social scene. Maria, always open to meeting new people in her travels, engaged in casual conversation with him. Nothing about the encounter seemed unusual or threatening. It was simply another night out in a foreign city, the kind of experience that had become routine in her life as a traveling content creator. What Maria could not have known was that this seemingly innocent meeting would set in motion a chain of events that would nearly cost her life. The young man who appeared so charming and sophisticated was harboring darker intentions, and their paths would cross again in ways that she could never have anticipated. As the night wound down, Maria returned to her hotel, looking forward to completing her scheduled photo shoots and then catching her planned flight to Thailand. She had bookings lined up in Bangkok and was excited about the content opportunities that awaited her there. Everything seemed perfectly normal, just another successful business trip that would add to her growing portfolio and bank account. But fate had other plans. Sometimes the smallest decisions can have the most devastating consequences, and Maria was about to learn this lesson in the most brutal way possible. March 10th arrived with Maria waking up later than she had intended. The previous night's festivities had run longer than expected, and when she checked her phone, a sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Her flight to Thailand was scheduled to depart in just a few hours, and there was no way she could make it to the airport in time. Frantically, she tried to rebook her flight, but the next available departure was not for several days. The delay meant that her carefully planned schedule in Bangkok would be completely disrupted, potentially costing her thousands of dollars in lost booking fees and missed opportunities. The stress of the situation weighed heavily on her as she realized she would need to extend her stay in Dubai unexpectedly. As she went through the process of checking out of her hotel room, wondering where she would stay for the next few nights, fate intervened in what seemed like a stroke of good fortune. Walking through the lobby, she spotted a familiar face from the night before. It was Artem Papazov, the charming Russian businessman she had met at the karaoke club. Artem approached her with a warm smile, remembering their conversation from the previous evening. When Maria explained her predicament about the missed flight and her need to find new accommodations, his response seemed like an answer to her prayers. He offered to help, suggesting that she could stay in his hotel room with him and his friends who were also visiting Dubai. But the offer became even more appealing when Artem mentioned that his father owned a private jet, and he could arrange for Maria to fly with them to Thailand once their Dubai business was concluded. The prospect of traveling on a private aircraft was certainly attractive, but more importantly, it would allow her to reach Bangkok without the expensive rebooking fees and lengthy delays of commercial flights. Maria's decision to accept Artem's offer was not made lightly. She was an experienced traveler who had learned to be cautious about trusting strangers, especially in foreign countries. However, several factors contributed to her feeling that this was a safe choice. Artem appeared wealthy and well-connected, the kind of person who moved in legitimate business circles. He had been respectful during their previous interaction, and the presence of other people in his group suggested that this was not some isolated encounter with a single individual. Moreover, Maria was not naive about the world she operated in. As a content creator who frequently traveled alone and met new people for business purposes, she had developed what she believed were good instincts about reading people and situations. Nothing about Artem or his demeanor had raised any red flags during their initial meeting. When she called her mother Anna to inform her about the change in plans, Maria spoke openly about the situation while Artem and his friends were present. This was a deliberate choice on her part, intended as a safety measure to ensure that someone back home knew her whereabouts and the people she was with. Anna, listening to her daughter's voice, heard nothing that concerned her. Maria sounded upbeat and in control of the situation. The conversation with her mother took place in front of Artem's group, which included Alexander Laptinsky from Belarus, Alexander Meretsalov, a 19-year-old whose father owned medical centers in Moscow, and a few others who appeared to be part of Dubai's international social scene. They all seemed pleasant and normal, engaging in the kind of casual conversation that travelers often have when they meet in foreign cities. Artem's hotel room was located in one of Dubai's luxury establishments, the kind of place that suggested financial means and legitimate business purposes. The accommodations were impressive, with expansive views of the city and all the amenities that wealthy travelers expected. For someone like Maria, who was building her career and carefully managing her expenses, the opportunity to stay in such a place without cost was certainly appealing. As the day progressed, the group discussed their planned trip to Thailand with enthusiasm. They talked about destinations, activities, and the logistics of traveling together on Artem's father's private jet. The conversation was engaging and seemed to confirm that these were successful, well-traveled individuals who could offer Maria both companionship and professional networking opportunities. What Maria could not have known was that her decision to trust these seemingly sophisticated travelers would lead her into a nightmare that would nearly cost her life. The charming facades that had convinced her of their legitimacy were carefully constructed masks hiding much darker intentions. As evening approached on March 10th, the atmosphere in the luxury hotel room began to shift in ways that Maria initially tried to dismiss as typical party behavior. The group had been drinking throughout the day, but as night fell, their consumption of alcohol became significantly more intense. Bottles of expensive whiskey appeared, and the casual social drinking transformed into something much more aggressive and deliberate. Artem Papazov, who had been charming and respectful earlier, began to change in subtle but noticeable ways. His voice became louder, his gestures more expansive, and his attention toward Maria more focused and invasive. The same transformation was occurring in Alexander Laptinsky and Alexander Meretsalov, as if the alcohol was stripping away whatever restraint they had maintained during the daylight hours. Initially, Maria tried to participate in the festive atmosphere while maintaining her own boundaries. When the group pressured her to drink more heavily, she politely declined, explaining that she preferred to pace herself. This response, which should have been perfectly reasonable and acceptable, instead seemed to irritate some members of the group. The pressure to drink became more persistent and took on an edge that made Maria increasingly uncomfortable. Comments that had started as friendly encouragement began to sound more like commands. When she continued to resist their pressure, the mood in the room shifted noticeably. Alexander Meretsalov, despite being only 19 years old, displayed a level of aggression that surprised Maria. His behavior suggested someone who was accustomed to getting his way and who did not respond well to being told no. The combination of alcohol, drugs that had appeared during the evening, and what appeared to be a sense of entitlement created a volatile atmosphere. The situation escalated when physical contact began. What started as shoulder pushing and aggressive gestures became more pointed and threatening. The men began making comments that crossed clear boundaries, with phrases like, "You belong to us, we will do whatever we want," being spoken with increasing seriousness rather than the joking tone they initially claimed. Maria's attempts to treat these comments as humor were becoming more strained as the intent behind them became clearer. The laughter that accompanied such statements had a cruel edge, and the looks being exchanged between the men suggested coordination rather than spontaneous party behavior. The physical environment of the room itself became increasingly chaotic and threatening. Bottles were being smashed deliberately on the floor, creating a carpet of broken glass that made movement dangerous and escape more difficult. The destruction seemed intentional, designed to create an atmosphere of fear and unpredictability. One of the most alarming developments was when the group confiscated Maria's personal belongings, including her passport. This action was presented as being done in a spirit of fun, but Maria recognized it for what it was, a means of control and an attempt to prevent her from leaving. Without her identification documents, she would be unable to check into another hotel, board a flight, or even prove her identity to authorities if needed. The psychological pressure was intensified by sexual advances that became increasingly explicit and threatening. The men made it clear that they expected physical compliance from Maria, and their behavior suggested that her consent was not a factor they were prepared to consider seriously. Alexander Leptinsky proved to be particularly aggressive in his advances, using his larger physical size to intimidate Maria when she attempted to maintain her boundaries. The combination of his physical presence and the effects of the substances he had consumed made him increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. Throughout this escalating situation, Maria was trying to assess her options and plan her next moves. The hotel room, which had seemed like a safe haven earlier in the day, now felt like a trap. The presence of broken glass on the floor, the confiscation of her belongings, and the increasingly aggressive behavior of her hosts made it clear that she was in genuine danger. The realization that she had made a serious error in judgment was accompanied by the understanding that she needed to find a way to escape before the situation deteriorated further. The men's behavior was escalating rapidly, and their comments suggested that they had plans for her that would involve serious physical harm. As the night wore on, Maria's fear was replaced by a determination to survive whatever was happening to her. She began to look for opportunities to break free from the increasingly dangerous situation, knowing that her life might depend on her ability to think clearly and act decisively despite the terror that was building inside her. By the early hours of March 11th, Maria knew with absolute certainty that she was in mortal danger. The behavior of Artem Papazov, Alexander Leptinsky, and Alexander Meretsalov had escalated far beyond what could be explained by alcohol or party atmosphere. Their actions were deliberate, coordinated, and designed to terrorize and control her. When the men stepped out onto the hotel room's balcony, Maria saw what might be her only opportunity to escape. The conversation they were having seemed intense and private, giving her a few precious moments where their attention was diverted from monitoring her every movement. With her heart pounding and adrenaline coursing through her system, Maria moved as quietly as possible toward the room's exit. The broken glass on the floor made silent movement nearly impossible, but she managed to navigate around the worst of the debris while the men remained engaged in their discussion outside. However, her escape attempt was short-lived. Before she could reach the door, Leptinsky and Papazov noticed her movement and reacted with immediate aggression. They rushed back into the room and physically dragged her away from the exit, making it clear that leaving was not an option they were prepared to allow. The physical violence that accompanied this failed escape attempt marked a turning point in Maria's ordeal. Any pretense of this being a social gathering or party disappeared as the men demonstrated their willingness to use force to keep her contained. The grabbing, pulling, and restraining left no doubt about their intentions. But Maria's survival instincts were stronger than their ability to contain her indefinitely. Despite the physical intimidation and the confiscation of her belongings, she remained focused on finding another opportunity to break free. She understood that her life depended on her ability to escape, and she was prepared to take significant risks to do so. When another opportunity presented itself, Maria made a desperate run for freedom. This time, she managed to get out of the hotel room and into the hallway, but her ordeal was far from over. Wearing only a hotel bathrobe, she ran through the building and out into the Dubai streets, desperately seeking safety and help. The men pursued her, and Maria realized that she needed to find a place to hide rather than simply trying to outrun them. In her panicked state, she spotted what appeared to be an unfinished construction site nearby. The building offered potential hiding places among the exposed concrete, construction equipment, and incomplete structures. Maria made the decision to enter the construction site, hoping that she could find a secure hiding place where her pursuers would not be able to locate her. The site was dark, filled with hazards, and completely unfamiliar, but it seemed to offer better prospects for survival than remaining on the open streets where she could be easily spotted and recaptured. The construction site was a maze of unfinished rooms, exposed rebar, incomplete staircases, and construction materials. In her terror and desperation, Maria tried to navigate this dangerous environment while looking for a secure place to wait until she could be sure that her pursuers had given up their search. But the men had followed her into the construction site, and they were determined to prevent her from escaping and potentially reporting their actions to authorities. What happened next in those dark, unfinished spaces would remain largely hidden in Maria's memory, lost to the trauma of what she experienced. The next clear memory Maria would have was of being discovered by a passing motorist on a Dubai roadside, broken and barely alive. The intervening time between her desperate flight into the construction site and her discovery 10 days later would remain a gap that even intensive medical care and psychological support could not fully restore. What is certain is that during those lost hours in the construction site, Maria suffered injuries so severe that they would require multiple emergency surgeries and months of intensive rehabilitation. The nature and extent of her injuries suggested either a severe beating or a fall from a significant height, or quite possibly both. The young woman who had entered that construction site in a desperate attempt to save her life would emerge from it fundamentally changed, facing a long journey of physical and psychological recovery that would test every aspect of her strength and determination. March 19, 2025, began as an ordinary morning for the motorist who was driving along one of Dubai's busy roadways. The sun was rising over the gleaming city, casting long shadows across the pavement as early commuters began their daily routines. Nothing about the morning suggested that this driver was about to make a discovery that would shock the international community and expose a horrific crime. It was approximately 7:30 in the morning when the driver spotted what appeared to be a person lying motionless beside the road. At first glance, it might have been dismissed as refuse or debris, but something about the shape and positioning made the driver slow down for a closer look. What they saw was a young woman, barely recognizable as human due to the extent of her injuries. She was conscious but unable to speak clearly, wearing only a torn hotel bathrobe that provided little protection from the elements. Her body showed signs of severe trauma that were immediately apparent, even to someone without medical training. The motorist immediately called emergency services, and within minutes, Dubai's emergency response teams were on the scene. Paramedics who had seen countless accident victims and trauma cases were reportedly shaken by the severity of Maria's condition. The injuries were so extensive that the initial concern was simply keeping her alive long enough to reach the hospital. Maria Kovalchuk was rushed to one of Dubai's premier medical facilities, where a team of specialists immediately began working to stabilize her condition. The preliminary examination revealed injuries that were consistent with either a severe beating, a fall from a significant height, or quite possibly both types of trauma. Her spine had been fractured in multiple places, requiring immediate surgical intervention to prevent permanent paralysis. Both of her arms had been broken, along with several ribs and multiple fractures in her legs. The head trauma she had sustained was severe enough to cause memory loss and difficulty with speech and cognitive function. The medical team's first priority was performing emergency surgery to address the most life-threatening injuries. The spinal damage required delicate work by neurosurgeons who had to carefully realign fractured vertebrae and relieve pressure on her spinal cord. This initial surgery lasted several hours and was followed by additional procedures to set the fractures in her limbs. During the first 24 hours of her hospitalization, Maria underwent 4 separate surgical procedures. Each surgery was necessary to address different aspects of her trauma, and the medical team worked around the clock to give her the best possible chance of survival and recovery. News of Maria's discovery quickly reached her family in Norway. Anna Kovalchuk received the devastating phone call that no parent ever wants to receive, informing her that her daughter had been found critically injured and was fighting for her life in a Dubai hospital. Anna immediately made arrangements to travel to Dubai, desperate to be by her daughter's side during this crisis. The Dubai police were notified about the case, and an investigation was immediately opened. However, the initial police response would later become a source of significant controversy and frustration for Maria's family and supporters around the world. According to the official police account, their investigation determined that Maria had entered a restricted construction site on her own and had sustained her injuries by falling from a height within that site. This explanation suggested that her injuries were the result of an accident rather than criminal activity. However, this official account raised immediate questions and concerns. The severity and pattern of Maria's injuries seemed inconsistent with a simple fall, and the 10-day gap between her disappearance and discovery was not adequately explained by the police version of events. Maria's family and friends found the police explanation difficult to accept. They knew that Maria was an experienced traveler who was generally cautious about her personal safety. The idea that she would voluntarily enter a dangerous construction site alone, particularly while wearing only a hotel bathrobe, seemed completely out of character. Moreover, the timing of her discovery raised additional questions. If Maria had simply fallen at a construction site, why had it taken 10 days for her to be found? Construction sites in Dubai are typically active during daylight hours, and it seemed unlikely that someone with such severe injuries could have remained undiscovered for over a week. When Maria Kovalchuk arrived in Dubai and saw her daughter's condition firsthand, her concerns about the official explanation intensified. The injuries she observed seemed far more extensive and varied than what would be expected from a single fall, even from a significant height. As Maria slowly began to regain consciousness and some ability to communicate, it became clear that she had no memory of the events that had led to her injuries. The head trauma she had sustained had caused significant memory loss, particularly regarding the period immediately before and during her ordeal. The official investigation into Maria Kovalchuk's case by Dubai authorities would become a source of international controversy and allegations of a systematic cover-up. What began as a missing person case had evolved into something far more complex and troubling, with questions arising about the thoroughness and integrity of the police investigation. Within days of Maria's discovery, Dubai police announced their conclusion that she had sustained her injuries by entering a restricted construction site alone and falling from a height. This determination was presented as the result of what they described as a comprehensive investigation, but the speed with which this conclusion was reached raised immediate questions. The police account suggested that Maria had somehow ended up at a construction site during the night of March 10th or early morning of March 11th, entered the site on her own, and suffered a catastrophic fall that left her with multiple fractures and head trauma. According to this version of events, she had then remained at or near the construction site for the next 10 days before finally being discovered on the roadside. However, this official explanation failed to address numerous inconsistencies and unanswered questions. Most significantly, it did not explain how someone with such severe injuries could have survived for 10 days without medical attention, food, or water. The nature of her spinal injuries alone should have made movement impossible, yet somehow she had ended up beside a busy roadway where she could be discovered by passing motorists. The investigation took on additional complexity when Ukrainian authorities announced that they were opening their own case into Maria's disappearance and injuries. On March 29th, the National Police of Ukraine, specifically the main investigation department of the Lviv region where Maria was from, officially launched a human trafficking investigation. This parallel investigation by Ukrainian authorities suggested that they had serious doubts about the Dubai police conclusion and believed that Maria had been the victim of criminal activity rather than an unfortunate accident. The human trafficking charge indicated that they suspected she had been held against her will and subjected to violence by individuals who had intended to exploit her. The suspects in the case were identified relatively quickly. Artem Papazov, Alexander Laptinsky, Alexander Meritsalov, and the other individuals who had been with Maria on the night of her disappearance were located and questioned by Dubai authorities. However, the handling of these suspects would become another source of controversy. According to Maria's account, which she would later provide in an interview with Russian journalist Ksenia Sobchak, the suspects were detained by Dubai police for questioning but were released after only 1 day. This brief detention period seemed inadequate given the severity of the allegations and the extent of Maria's injuries. Even more troubling was the revelation that when Ukrainian authorities requested to reopen the case and conduct their own investigation, the suspects were detained again but once again released after just 24 hours. This pattern suggested that despite the international attention the case was receiving, Dubai authorities were not treating it as a serious criminal matter. One of the most significant obstacles to the investigation was the alleged destruction of evidence. Maria later claimed that CCTV footage that might have shown what happened during her final hours before the assault had been automatically erased after 3 months, as was standard procedure for surveillance systems in Dubai. This loss of potential video evidence was particularly frustrating because it occurred while the investigation was still ongoing. If authorities had acted more quickly to preserve and analyze surveillance footage from the hotel, nearby streets, and the construction site, it might have provided crucial evidence about what actually happened to Maria. The automatic erasure of surveillance footage raised questions about whether Dubai authorities had been sufficiently proactive in securing evidence during the critical early days of the investigation. For a case involving such serious injuries and international attention, the failure to preserve potentially crucial evidence seemed like a significant oversight. Maria's family and supporters began to suspect that there were factors influencing the investigation that went beyond simple police work. The speed with which the case was initially closed, the brief detention periods for the suspects, and the loss of surveillance evidence all contributed to a perception that powerful interests might be protecting the individuals responsible for Maria's injuries. The international nature of the case also complicated the investigation, with Maria being Ukrainian, the suspects being Russian and Belarusian, and the incident occurring in the United Arab Emirates. Questions of jurisdiction and diplomatic considerations may have influenced how the case was handled. As time passed and the investigation seemed to stall, Maria's case began to attract attention from international media and human rights organizations. The circumstances of her injuries, combined with the apparent inadequacy of the official investigation, made her situation a symbol of the dangers faced by young women traveling alone in foreign countries. The journey from the brink of death to her eventual recovery would prove to be one of the most challenging ordeals of Maria Kovalchuk's young life. The physical trauma she had endured was severe enough that doctors initially were uncertain whether she would survive, let alone recover her basic functions. During her initial weeks in the Dubai hospital, Maria remained in a medically induced coma while her body fought to heal from the extensive injuries. The multiple surgeries had addressed the most immediate threats to her life, but the long-term prognosis remained uncertain. The spinal injuries were of particular concern, as they could potentially result in permanent paralysis if the healing process did not proceed successfully. Maria Kovalchuk remained by her daughter's side throughout this critical period, communicating with doctors and coordinating with both Ukrainian and Norwegian authorities about Maria's care and legal situation. The stress of seeing her daughter in such a condition, combined with the frustration of getting limited information from Dubai police about the investigation, took a significant toll on Anna's own health and well-being. As Maria slowly began to regain consciousness, it became clear that the road to recovery would be long and difficult. The head trauma had affected her ability to speak and had caused significant memory loss, particularly regarding the events surrounding her assault. This memory loss was both a blessing and a curse, as it spared her from reliving the worst moments of her ordeal, but also made it difficult for investigators to understand exactly what had happened to her. The process of relearning basic functions like speech and movement required intensive therapy and rehabilitation. Maria had to work with physical therapists to regain the use of her limbs, speech therapists to improve her communication abilities, and occupational therapists to help her develop the skills needed for daily living. After several months of treatment in Dubai, arrangements were made to transfer Maria to a specialized rehabilitation facility in Norway, where she could be closer to her family and receive long-term care in a more familiar environment. The transfer was complex, requiring medical transport and coordination between multiple healthcare systems, but it represented an important step in her recovery process. The Norwegian medical facility where Maria continued her rehabilitation had extensive experience with trauma victims and was able to provide the specialized care she needed. The change of environment also seemed to have a positive psychological effect, as being closer to her family and support network helped with her emotional recovery. As Maria's physical condition gradually improved and her ability to communicate returned, she began to process what had happened to her and consider whether to speak publicly about her experience. The decision to break her silence was not made lightly, as she understood that doing so would bring additional scrutiny and potentially re-traumatize her. However, Maria ultimately decided that sharing her experience was important, both for her own healing process and to raise awareness about the dangers that young women face when traveling alone. She chose to give her first comprehensive interview to Russian journalist Ksenia Sobchak, partly because the primary perpetrators of her assault had been Russian citizens, and she wanted to address that community directly. The interview, which was conducted in July 2025, provided the first detailed account of what had happened to Maria from her own perspective. Her recollections were still affected by the trauma-induced memory loss, but she was able to provide enough detail to paint a clear picture of how a seemingly innocent social encounter had turned into a nightmare. During the interview, Maria spoke about the moment when she realized that she was in genuine danger, her desperate attempts to escape, and the failure of the various systems that should have protected her. She was particularly critical of the Dubai police investigation, which she felt had been inadequate and possibly influenced by factors beyond the pursuit of justice. Maria's decision to speak publicly about her experience was met with widespread support from advocacy groups and individuals around the world who saw her as a symbol of resilience and courage. Her willingness to share such a traumatic experience in hopes of preventing similar incidents from happening to other young women was seen as an act of considerable bravery. The interview also served to renew international attention on her case and put additional pressure on Dubai authorities to conduct a more thorough investigation. While the immediate perpetrators had avoided serious consequences for their actions, Maria's public testimony made it much more difficult for the case to be quietly forgotten. As Maria continued her recovery in Norway, she also began to rebuild her life and consider her future. The physical and psychological scars from her ordeal would always be part of her experience, but she was determined not to let them define her entirely. Her journey from victim to survivor to advocate represented a remarkable transformation that inspired many people around the world. As of July 2025, Maria Kovalchuk continues her recovery journey in Norway, supported by her family and a team of medical professionals who have helped her rebuild her life after the devastating assault in Dubai. While she has made remarkable progress from the broken young woman who was discovered on that roadside in March, the effects of her ordeal continue to shape her daily existence. Physically, Maria has regained much of her mobility, though she still requires the use of crutches and a wheelchair for longer distances. The spinal injuries that once threatened to leave her permanently paralyzed have healed sufficiently to allow her to walk short distances, a recovery that her doctors describe as remarkable given the severity of her initial injuries. Her cognitive abilities have also improved significantly from the early days when she was unable to speak or recognize her own family members. While some memory issues persist, particularly regarding the specific details of her assault, Maria has regained most of her intellectual capacity and is able to engage in complex conversations and decision-making. The legal situation surrounding her case remains frustratingly unresolved. Despite the international attention and the parallel investigation by Ukrainian authorities, none of the individuals identified as being responsible for her assault have faced serious criminal charges. Artem Papazov, Alexander Laptinsky, Alexander Meretsalov, and the other suspects have all returned to their normal lives, apparently without significant consequences for their actions. This lack of legal accountability has been a source of ongoing frustration for Maria and her family, as well as for the advocates and organizations that have supported her case. The apparent impunity enjoyed by her attackers sends a troubling message about the value placed on the safety and rights of young women, particularly those who work in industries like adult content creation that are often stigmatized. However, Maria's decision to speak publicly about her experience has had broader impacts beyond the specific legal outcomes of her case. Her courage in sharing her ordeal has raised awareness about the dangers faced by young women who travel alone, particularly those involved in social media and content creation, who may be targeted by individuals seeking to exploit their perceived vulnerability. The case has also highlighted the importance of trusting personal instincts when something feels wrong, even in situations that appear safe on the surface. Maria's initial impression of Artem Papazov and his associates was that they were legitimate, successful individuals who could be trusted. This misjudgment nearly cost her life and serves as a powerful reminder that predators often present themselves in the most appealing and convincing ways. One of the most important lessons from Maria's experience is the critical importance of maintaining communication with trusted individuals when traveling alone. While Maria did call her mother to inform her about her change of plans, the fact that she was staying with people she had just met in a foreign country should have triggered additional safety measures. Travel safety experts recommend that individuals in similar situations should provide detailed information about their whereabouts to multiple people, establish regular check-in schedules, and have backup plans for situations where original arrangements change unexpectedly. The failure to take these additional precautions can have catastrophic consequences, as Maria's case demonstrates. The case also raises important questions about how law enforcement agencies handle crimes against foreign nationals, particularly in countries where diplomatic and economic considerations may influence the pursuit of justice. The apparent reluctance of Dubai authorities to pursue serious charges against the suspects suggests that factors beyond the evidence and the law may have played a role in the investigation. For young women involved in content creation, modeling, or other industries that involve travel and meeting new people, Maria's experience serves as a crucial reminder about the importance of working with established, reputable agencies and individuals. The promise of luxury accommodations, private jets, and exclusive opportunities can be used as bait by individuals with criminal intentions. The psychological impact of Maria's ordeal extends far beyond her own experience. Her case has become a symbol for advocates working to address violence against women, particularly in contexts where victims may be blamed or dismissed because of their profession or lifestyle choices. The support she has received from around the world demonstrates that many people recognize her as a victim of serious crimes rather than someone who somehow brought her injuries upon herself. As Maria continues to rebuild her life, she has expressed interest in using her experience to help other young women avoid similar dangers. While the legal system may have failed to provide her with justice, her willingness to share her experience publicly has created a powerful educational tool that may prevent other young women from finding themselves in similarly dangerous situations. The broader implications of Maria's case extend to discussions about international cooperation in criminal investigations, the protection of victims' rights, and the need for more effective mechanisms to hold perpetrators accountable when crimes cross national boundaries. Her experience demonstrates that in an increasingly connected world, the systems designed to protect individuals and pursue justice must also evolve to meet new challenges. Maria Kovalchuk's incredible survival against all odds stands as a testament to human resilience and the power of speaking truth in the face of injustice. Her journey from that devastating discovery on a Dubai roadside to her current recovery in Norway represents not just personal triumph, but a beacon of hope for countless other young women who face dangers while pursuing their dreams in an increasingly connected but sometimes predatory world. The courage Maria has shown in breaking her silence about her ordeal has already begun to save lives by educating others about the sophisticated tactics used by those who would exploit and harm vulnerable travelers. Her willingness to relive her trauma in order to protect others demonstrates a strength that goes far beyond physical recovery. While the legal system may have failed to deliver the justice that Maria deserves, her voice continues to resonate around the world, forcing conversations about safety, accountability, and the protection of those who find themselves far from home and support systems. Every person who hears her account and takes additional precautions as a result represents a victory against those who would prey upon the innocent. If you found Maria's case as compelling and important as we did, make sure to subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex for more incredible true crime investigations that shed light on the darkest corners of human behavior while celebrating the strength of those who survive. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest deep examinations into cases that will challenge everything you thought you knew about justice, survival, and the human spirit. Together, we can ensure that these vital accounts continue to reach the people who need to hear them most.